The days had begun to blur together. Quiet mornings, long afternoons, and endless evenings where nothing seemed to need her anymore. Anna sat by the window, watching people walk by on the street below. She envied them, their busyness, their laughter, their purpose. She had once moved through life that way, full of tasks and meaning. Now, it felt as though life had quietly closed its door behind her. Her children lived far away, each consumed by their own worlds. They called sometimes out of love more than habit, but even their words carried distance. "Take care, Mom," they'd say. "We'll visit soon." Yet soon never seemed to come. The silence of her apartment became a second skin, familiar but suffocating. The plants on the windowsill drooped despite her care. Even they seemed tired of waiting. Some nights she whispered into the dark, "Why am I still here?" Her voice trembled, the question heavy. She didn't want to die. She just wanted to matter again. Each morning, Anna faced the same reflection, a woman she barely recognized. Her hair had thinned, her shoulders curved forward, her hands trembled when she buttoned her blouse. But it wasn't age that pained her most. It was invisibility. She used to teach at the local school. She used to cook for her neighbors, help at church, mend clothes for anyone who needed it. Now people smiled at her politely on the street, the kind of smile one gives to someone fragile, someone who belongs to the past. She touched the wrinkles around her eyes, tracing the map of her years. "So this is what I've become," she whispered, "a shadow." But deep inside, a faint ache stirred, not of vanity, but of longing. She wanted to believe her life still held meaning, that God still had reason to keep her breathing. Yet each time she tried to pray, her words fell flat. She didn't know what to ask for anymore. Sometimes she wondered if heaven, too, had forgotten her name. It was a Sunday morning when Anna decided to attend church again. She dressed slowly, choosing her best sweater, though her hands trembled as she tied the buttons. The walk to the chapel was short, but felt longer than before. Inside, she sat quietly in the back pew. Around her, people greeted each other warmly, young families, laughing children, old friends exchanging hugs. No one noticed her, and that hurt more than she could admit. When the pastor spoke about purpose and calling, his words drifted past her like wind through open doors. She wanted to believe them, but she couldn't. Purpose was for others, for the young, the strong, the needed. As the service ended, she lingered, waiting for someone to speak to her. No one did. She left slowly, walking home under a grey sky. By the time she reached her apartment, she was crying softly. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, not loud, not wild, just a quiet, steady ache that refuses to stop. That night she looked at her hands, the same hands that had once held babies, cooked meals, tended wounds, and whispered, "What am I good for now?" The following week was harder. Her energy was gone. Even small tasks, watering her plants, making tea, felt heavy. The world seemed dim, drained of color. She sat in her chair one evening, Bible open but unread, and let her tears fall freely. "Jesus," she whispered, "if you can still hear me, please tell me why I'm here. I don't do anything that matters anymore." The words came between sobs. "I can't teach. I can't help. I can't serve. I'm just waiting." The room was silent, except for the sound of her weeping. She waited for something, a verse to stir her heart, a feeling, anything, but there was only quiet. She felt small, unseen, forgotten. It was the lowest she had ever been, and yet, even in that silence, something gentle began to rise within her, like the faint breath of a promise not yet spoken. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her tears had dried, but her heart was still raw. She stared at the ceiling, the faint light of the moon tracing patterns on her walls. Then it came. Not a sound, not even a word at first, but a presence, soft, tender, unmistakable. Her breath caught. The silence that had once felt cold now seemed alive, filled with warmth that didn't come from any lamp or blanket. And then she heard it, not through her ears, but in her soul. Anna, her name, spoken so gently it broke something open inside her. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice shaking, but deep down she already knew. Another whisper came, full of compassion, full of knowing. You still matter to me. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry again. Not the cry of despair, but the cry of a heart that had just remembered how to feel loved. She didn't move for a long time. The air around her was still, but it carried a sense of life, as though heaven itself had filled her small room. The presence didn't demand, didn't speak again, didn't need to. It was being itself, patient, near, and profoundly kind. Anna felt her body relax, the heaviness leaving her chest. It wasn't just comfort, it was revelation. She realized that the same Jesus she had taught her students about, the same Lord she had served in youth, was here now, not as memory, but as companion. For the first time in years, she didn't feel old. She didn't feel forgotten. She felt chosen. Her tears kept coming, but they were quiet now, flowing from awe rather than grief. She whispered, "You're here." And though there were no words in reply, she felt the room answer, not with sound, but with peace. The next morning, sunlight filled her apartment. Anna sat by the window, the same spot where she used to stare in silence. But today, she smiled faintly. The world looked the same street, the same people passing by, yet everything felt different. As she drank her tea, memories began to surface. The faces of students she had taught, the meals she had prepared for neighbors, the prayers she had whispered for those in pain. For the first time, she saw them not as things she used to do, but as seeds still growing somewhere unseen. Maybe, she thought, I wasn't meant to stop mattering. Maybe the fruit of my life just grew where I can't see it. It was a small thought, but it carried warmth. It was the kind of thought that healed something deep, not through answers, but through remembrance. She bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for not forgetting my name." That afternoon, a knock sounded at her door, rare enough to make her jump. When she opened it, she found a little boy from the building holding a torn schoolbook. "Miss Anna," he said shyly, "Mom said you used to be a teacher. Can you help me?" Her heart fluttered. She invited him in, brushing dust off the old desk in her corner. As they worked through the pages together, her voice came alive again. She explained, she smiled, she encouraged. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't lonely. She was useful. When the boy left, he turned and said, "You're really nice. I wish you were my teacher." Anna stood at the door long after he'd gone, her eyes shining. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of the echo of her laughter, of her purpose reborn. She whispered, "Thank you, Jesus. You remembered what I forgot." The following days brought with them a rhythm Anna hadn't known for years. Each morning she awoke before sunrise, not because of pain or habit, but because she wanted to. She began writing small prayers in her notebook, not for herself, but for others. She prayed for the children who passed beneath her window on their way to school. She prayed for her neighbors who argued late into the night. She prayed for the postman, the single mother down the hall, the lonely old man she sometimes saw feeding pigeons. Her life had not grown louder, but her heart had. Every prayer felt like a thread connecting her to something larger than herself, a quiet tapestry of love woven between heaven and earth. She no longer asked, "What am I good for?" because she had found her answer. She existed to love, and that was enough. As she wrote one morning, she felt that familiar warmth in her chest again, the same gentle presence that had filled her room that night. She smiled and whispered, "I see it now, Lord. You never stopped using me. I just stopped believing it." One afternoon, heavy rain began to fall, the kind that soaks the world in grey. Anna stood by her window, watching the droplets streak the glass, and felt a pang of sadness return. For a moment, doubt crept in again. Maybe it was all in my head, she thought. Maybe that voice, that warmth, was only what I wanted to feel. She turned away, her heart sinking. But then, from the street below, she noticed a young woman running through the rain, struggling to cover herself with a torn umbrella. Without thinking, Anna grabbed her old coat and hurried to open the door. "Come inside," she called out. The woman hesitated, then ran toward her, dripping and shivering. Anna brought towels, tea, and warm clothes. They sat together, talking as the rain fell outside. The young woman shared her story, her loneliness, her exhaustion, her fear of failing as a mother. Anna listened with quiet compassion, her eyes kind and steady. When the woman finally smiled through her tears, she said, "I don't know why you opened the door for me, but I feel like I was supposed to be here." Anna's heart swelled. She knew then that Grace had chosen another moment to remind her she was still his hands. Weeks passed. The young woman returned often, bringing her little boy along. Soon others from the building began stopping by too. A neighbor with a heavy heart, a teenager needing advice, a widow craving company. Anna's home became what it once had been in her younger days, a refuge. There was always tea on the stove, always light in the window, always a seat at the table. She never called it ministry. She never spoke of her purpose. She simply lived it. One evening, as she prepared extra tea for an unexpected guest, she paused to rest her hands on the counter. She realized she no longer felt the weight of uselessness. Her home, her voice, her prayers, all had become tools of grace. It wasn't the kind of work the world saw or celebrated. It was quieter, but it reached deeper, lasting longer, carrying eternity in every small act. As she poured another cup, she whispered, "So this is what it means to still matter." That night, Anna lit a candle and sat in her chair. The soft glow filled the room, flickering across the faces in her photographs, her children, her late husband, her students, her friends. For years, those pictures had been a gallery of absence. Now they were symbols of connection, reminders that her life had left traces of love everywhere it had touched. She folded her hands and began to pray, but this time there was no trembling, no pleading, no tears of despair. Her words came easily, carried by joy. "Thank you, Lord," she said softly, "for not taking me away when I thought I was finished, for showing me that I was never useless, only waiting to be used again." The candlelight danced gently, and the air around her seemed to glow. That same presence, quiet and holy, filled the room once more. She didn't need to hear his voice this time. She felt his smile in the peace that lingered. Her prayer ended in silence, not the empty kind, but the kind that hums with divine nearness. And in that silence, she whispered one last time before sleeping, "I am yours, Lord, and you have made me enough." A week later, Anna found an envelope in her mailbox. It was from her eldest daughter, Claire, the one who rarely called, always busy, always promising to visit soon. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a short letter, written in her daughter's careful handwriting. "Mom, I've been thinking of you a lot lately. I don't know why, but I feel like I should tell you how much I miss you. You were always the one who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for everything you gave, for every sacrifice I never thanked you for. I'm coming home next weekend. I just need to see you." Anna pressed the paper to her chest and began to weep, soft, steady tears that carried both sorrow and gratitude. She didn't know what had changed in her daughter's heart, but she recognized the touch of the same hand that had changed hers. The Lord had not only reminded her of her worth, he had begun to reveal it to others through her. When she looked out the window that morning, the world seemed brighter. The sky, the leaves, even the breeze whispered what her heart already knew. He redeems what we thought was lost. Saturday arrived with the scent of rain and spring. Anna stood at her door, her heart pounding as a car pulled into the driveway. Claire stepped out, older, more tired than she remembered, but still her little girl. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then Claire rushed forward and wrapped her mother in a long, trembling embrace. "I'm sorry," she whispered against her shoulder, "for not being here, for forgetting." Anna held her tighter, her voice calm and sure. "You never stopped being my child. There's nothing to forgive." They spent the afternoon talking, laughing, remembering. It was as if the years of silence melted away under the warmth of love reborn. Claire noticed the little touches around the house, the Bible open on the table, the teacups, the candle near the window. "You've made this place feel so alive, Mom," she said softly. "You're glowing." Anna smiled, her eyes glistening. "It's not me, dear. It's Jesus. He reminded me who I am." And as they sat together, both knew that something holy had entered the room. Word began to spread through the building that Miss Anna's door was always open, not for gossip or pity, but for peace. People came for tea, for prayer, for the kind of comfort that doesn't need many words. She listened to stories of pain and loss, laughter and confusion, always offering the same gentle reply: "You are loved. You still matter." Her worth had once seemed buried beneath the years, but now it flowed outward, through her hands, her words, her quiet presence. She began writing notes of encouragement and leaving them under doors, small messages like, "You are not forgotten. God still sees you. You have a reason to wake tomorrow." No one knew it was her, but they didn't need to. Love never asks for credit, and in giving others back their hope, Anna's own worth became unshakable. Not tied to doing, but to being the vessel of a love that never expires. One golden afternoon, as sunlight poured through her window, Anna found herself humming. The melody rose from deep within, unplanned, a song she hadn't sung since her youth. It was Amazing Grace. The words came haltingly at first, but soon her voice steadied. She sang of being lost and found, blind and made to see, and every word felt like truth reborn. Neighbors passing by stopped to listen through the open window. Some smiled, others, without knowing why, felt their hearts soften. Inside, Anna's tears fell freely, her voice quivering with gratitude. "You've been so good to me," she whispered between verses. "So patient. You let me live long enough to see who I still am." The room seemed to glow with warmth, the air shimmering softly as if heaven itself had leaned in to listen. When the song ended, she sat in silence, but it wasn't emptiness anymore. It was full, alive, eternal. Her life had become a hymn, one that would keep singing, even when her voice was gone. In the months that followed, Anna's home became a small refuge of grace. Neighbors started to describe it as the warm apartment, the place where the light never seemed to fade, where you could knock at any hour and be received with tea and a smile. She didn't organize anything, didn't call it a mission. She simply lived love, patient, open, unhurried. She taught the children to read, comforted the widows, and wrote small prayers for anyone who asked. Some evenings she would look around her little living room, at the laughter of visitors, the faint music from her old radio, the scent of cookies baking, and realize she was no longer invisible, not because the world saw her, but because God's love shone through her. She used to think she had nothing left to give, but now she understood. The heart that has been healed by Jesus never runs out of purpose. Her worth was not what she did, but what she became, a quiet reflection of the one who had called her by name. And when she prayed at night, she no longer asked for anything. She only whispered, "Use me until my last breath." One evening, the sky turned golden, the kind of light that makes even ordinary things look sacred. Anna sat by her window, wrapped in her shawl, watching the leaves sway in the breeze. Her Bible rested open on her lap. Though she wasn't reading, she was remembering. The memory of that night, the whisper, the warmth, the name spoken in her soul, still lived within her, alive as ever. It had become her anchor, her quiet truth. Whenever doubts tried to return, she only needed to close her eyes and breathe that presence again. A knock came at the door. A teenage boy she often helped with homework. He smiled shyly and handed her a small box. "Mom baked this for you," he said. "She says you're her blessing." Anna smiled, taking the box gently. After he left, she opened it to find a note inside. "Thank you for loving us like Jesus does." She pressed the note to her heart. The tears came again, but they were tears of abundance, not emptiness. The circle had completed itself. The woman who once felt useless now lived as proof that love never loses power, not even with age. The morning arrived quietly, with soft sunlight filling her little apartment. Birds sang outside, and the air carried the freshness of new beginnings. Anna woke slowly, her body frail, but her spirit stronger than ever. She sat on the edge of her bed and smiled. Every breath felt like a gift, every moment borrowed grace. She looked around her home, at the photographs on the wall, the candle by the window, the notebook of prayers on her table. She whispered, "You did it, Lord. You made my life useful again." Her chest ached softly, but it wasn't pain, it was fullness. She lay back against her pillow, closing her eyes, feeling the same warmth she had felt that night long ago when he had called her name. And before the day had fully begun, she heard it once more, faint, gentle, unmistakable. "Anna." This time she didn't answer with words. Her soul answered with peace. When her neighbors found her later that day, she was resting peacefully, a faint smile on her lips, her hands folded over her Bible. The candle on the table had burned low, its flame still dancing, stubborn against the morning light. They stood in silence, moved by something they couldn't quite name. The room felt warm, almost holy. Word spread quickly. Miss Anna had gone to be with the Lord. But those who knew her best didn't speak of her death with sadness. They spoke of her life, the quiet way she had changed hearts, the peace that had followed her wherever she went. Her daughter returned to sit in her mother's chair days later. The room still carried her scent, her softness, her presence. She whispered, "You were never useless, Mum. You were everything." And in that stillness the peace remained, not fading, not departing, but staying like sunlight on water. Anna's worth had never been lost. It had only been waiting for her to see it through the eyes of the one who had loved her all along.